We've been talking about constructions for the past few weeks, and we're going to put that aside for most of the rest of the year. But we are going to do a little bit of review from time to time. We're going to do practice Regents problems. You see, we did one last week. We'll be doing one or more than one every week throughout the year. And so some of these questions are going to be construction questions. They're going to be from all walks of the Regents exam. I wanted to give you in this video some sense of how teachers are allowed to grade construction questions when we see them on the Regents exam. There's one, I think there was 1 year when they kind of worked 2 questions in, but most of the time there is one 2-point question. 2 points, every once in a while they work a 4-point question in. So let's take a look at a typical Regents exam construction question, and we can look through the model responses and see what kind of grades students got. So this will be a little bit of a quiz for you to see if you can guess what these points are worth. All right, so this is question 31 from June of 2019. So this is a 2-point question. Given circle O with radius OA, use a compass and straight edge to construct an equilateral triangle inscribed in circle O. And as always, they say leave all construction marks. They will always say that on construction questions. So here's a student, and this is the construction they did. So pause the video and look at it and see if you can figure out what they did and how many points out of 2 points you think this is worth. Well, this student did the construction that I told you to do in the triangle building construction. So they had their compass open to the radius of the circle, and then with their compass pointy end on A, they marked this arc here. And then they moved the pointy end to here and marked this point, and then walked around the circle, marking all of these points. And then they connected the, every other point, kind of like you were constructing a hexagon, except that then they constructed a triangle instead. So this is an equilateral triangle. It is inscribed in circle O. All 3 points of the triangle are on the boundary of the circle. They used the compass and straight edge, and they left all construction marks. So out of 2 points, this is worth 2 points. The student gave a complete and correct response. All right, here's a different construction. Pause the video and take a look at it. See if you can figure out what the student did. And once again, give them a score. So this time the student did something a little bit different. They drew a straight line from A to O to the other side of the circle. And then with their compass open, once again, to the radius of the circle, they swept out this whole arc here. And so the 2 points that they came up with, they made to be the other 2 points of the triangle. So it's kind of like they did this, except instead of constructing all 6 points, they constructed this point by drawing this straight line all the way down, and then they constructed these 2 points from this one. So, is this an equilateral triangle inscribed in circle O? Yes, it is. Did they use their compass and straight edge? Yes, they did. Did they leave all of their construction marks? Yes, they did. And because the student left all their construction marks, I can see the steps they went through. It's not the same steps that I would use, but I can follow their reasoning because they left their marks on the paper. So this construction is also worth 2 points. Here's a different attempt. See what you can make of this one. Well, this was really interesting, and once again, I can look at the construction marks to see what the student did. So this time, the student once again drew a line from A through O to find this bottom point here, and then, looking at these construction marks, can you guess what they did? Well, these are the marks that you make when you do a perpendicular bisector construction. And so I could either use my compass, or I can use kind of my judgment to say, well, these 2 arcs, what would the center of that circle be? So that would be O. And the other two arcs, these arcs here and here, would have a center of A. So what it looks like the student did is they constructed the perpendicular bisector of AO. And where that line met the circle, they used as the other 2 points for their construction. Does this construct an equilateral triangle? Well, honestly, if I were grading this paper, I would have to sit down and do a little math to figure it out. Or I would need to construct an equilateral triangle on a piece of tracing paper and lay it on top of this to see if they actually did come up with an equilateral triangle here. But it turns out that they do. So this student used a construction I had never seen before. I looked at this document 20 minutes ago, but they did construct an equilateral triangle inscribed in circle O. They did use their compass and straight edge, and they did leave all construction marks. So this student gets full credit, and I would track them down and give them a Jolly Rancher for teaching me a new construction technique of an equilateral triangle. That's pretty cool. All right, how about this student? What do you think they did? Did they follow the instructions? And how many points do you think they would get for this? Well, this student had their compass open to AO, to the radius of the circle. And so with their pointy end at A, they swept out this arc. And then using this point and A and O, they constructed a triangle. Is this an equilateral triangle? Yes, it is. Because it's if we drew out that hexagon, it would be clear that all three sides have the same length. These are both radiuses, and these two are the same length because we swept out the compass with them. So it's definitely an equilateral triangle. Is it inscribed in circle O? Remember, inscribed means that all three vertices of the triangle are on the boundary of the circle. And O is the center of the circle. It's not on the boundary of the circle. So this is not inscribed in circle O, but they did use a compass and straight edge to use their construction. They did leave all construction marks, so I can see what this student did. How many points do you think this is worth? Well, they did some work, but they didn't do exactly what we asked them to do. So they're going to get 1 out of 2 points for this, for not having a triangle that's inscribed in the circle, but being equilateral. How about this student? What did they do? Once again, because they left their construction marks like we tell you to, we can put together what this student did. So this student connected A and O and extended the line, so they came up with this point at the bottom. And then, based on these two arcs and the way they drew a line, they conducted the perpendicular bisector of this diameter. So it's kind of like they were constructing a square, except they wound up just making a triangle here. All right, so is this an equilateral triangle inscribed in circle O? Well, all 3 points of the triangle are on the boundary of the circle, so it is inscribed, but it's not equilateral. All right, these 2 points are the same length because they're on the perpendicular bisector. So this is an isosceles triangle. It turns out this is a right angle. We'll see why much later in the year. So this is an isosceles right triangle, but it's not equilateral. These 3 are not the same size because this side is clearly much longer than the other 2. But they constructed an inscribed circle, they used their compass and straight edge, and they left all construction marks. So once again, this solution is worth 1 out of 2 points. All right, and here is the final construction. How do you think this student did? Well, this is definitely the cleanest construction that I've seen. It might be an equilateral triangle. If I got out a piece of tracing paper and laid it down, it might line up perfectly. But what did this student not do? They didn't leave their construction marks. All right, this is why I urge you to leave your construction marks when you do constructions, because I have no idea I can't put together a story of how the student determined that these 2 points should be the other 2 sides of the triangle. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but without any construction marks, this is not a geometric construction. I don't know that the student used the compass and straight edge. I mean, it's an inscribed circle. It may or may not be equilateral, but without the compass and straight edge marks, I have no idea what this diagram is. And so this construction is worth, well, it's not a construction. This diagram, this solution is worth 0 points. All right, because there are no construction marks, so I can't tell what they did. All right. I hope that gave you a good idea. There were a bunch of different constructions there, all kinds of different ways to construct an equilateral triangle that's inscribed in a circle. So the moral of the story is you don't need to use the exact technique I did. The way I taught you, I like it a lot because it's the steps you would go through to make a regular hexagon, except that you just skip the last step, and instead of drawing 6 sides, you just draw 3. But you can use any of those techniques that actually work to make an equilateral triangle, as long as you're leaving your marks and as long as a teacher can see from your marks what you did. You can't put notes on the side saying I did this, 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 and this. You need to use the construction marks to tell your story. But as long as your story is good, you can get full credit for constructing an equilateral triangle using a different technique. But you put down the marks and make sure that you're reading the instructions carefully to make sure that you're doing exactly the thing that that you're being asked to do, and you will do fine on those construction questions.